Today we're going to speak about different types of variables. We have already mentioned that objects in general populations have different properties. In our example with men, they can have weight, height, sex, marital status, number of children, and so on. To study these properties and their connections in the population, we form a sample. Fixed characteristics of the objects in our sample are called variables. I suppose you have already met the most common way to represent the data as a table, like here. Actually, there are several possible ways to represent the data in a table. The most common and useful way is called a long data format. In the long data format, each row in a table is one observation, for instance, one subject in our study, and each column is a variable. All the variables which we are going to work with can be divided into two types: numerical and categorical variables. Numerical variables represent measured values of quantitative characteristics like height or weight. Depending on the nature of quantitative characteristics, a numerical variable can be continuous or discrete. In the case of continuous variable, we expect that our variable takes any value on a given interval. For instance, height can take any value from 1 to 2 meters. On the other hand, if your variable can take only some possible values, we call it discrete. Consider the number of children in a family. This variable can be equal only to an integer number, and as a result, this is a discrete variable. In contrast to numerical variables, categorical variables represent qualitative characteristics of objects, and most often these variables are used to divide observation into groups. Variables of this type can be also called nominative variables or just factors. In our case, sex and marital status are categorical variables. For example, to indicate the sex of a subject, we could use number 1 for males and 0 for females. Here, numbers are just labels to indicate the sex of our subjects. All possible values of categorical variable are called levels. The variable sex has two levels, male and female. The marital status variable might have 4 levels: single, engaged, married, and divorced. We can also represent our data using ordinal variables. This kind of variable is somewhere between numerical and categorical variables. For example, we could describe temperature using a scale from freezing through cold and comfortable to warm and hot. Again, it is possible to say what the exact difference between the cold and warm is. We just know that the temperature in a warm place is higher than in a cold one. Before we go further, it's very important to point out one thing about variables. The same characteristic of an object can be represented by variables of different types. Height can be measured precisely, then it would be a numerical variable. Or we can sort out objects by their height and then it will be an ordinal variable. In fact, we should have divided all the subjects to either above average or below average height. In such a situation, variable height would be very close to a categorical variable. Now let's take a quiz. Which of the following are best treated as discrete variables? Of course, it's number of intro to statistics participants who reached the maximum score and number of pets in a family. Two basic types of variables in statistics are: we have learned it, categorical, VC, numerical. Suppose we have a sample of 10 people in an ordinal scale. One is the tallest. Which of the following is correct? It is the second variant. Person 4 is taller than person 6, but shorter than person 2.